My name is Elena, and I still remember the photograph I was holding when I finally left my family's house. In it, my mother was smiling. My father looked relieved. My brother had one arm around Mom, laughing like someone had just handed him the best news of his life. The best part? They were celebrating because I was leaving. Mom had hugged me at the door and whispered, "At least things will finally be normal around here." Dad didn't say much. He just nodded. My brother called after me. "Give it a month. You'll come crawling back." I didn't argue. I loaded my boxes, drove to my new apartment, and closed the door behind me. 3 weeks later, the first envelope arrived at their house. Then another. Then another. Soon, there were 47. That's when my phone rang. My mother sounded confused. "Elena, do you know anything about these bills?" I looked at the photograph on my kitchen counter and suddenly understood something they didn't. They had no idea what was happening. And those 47 bills weren't the beginning of my revenge. They were the beginning of their realization. My name is Emma Carter. I was 29 when I moved back into my parents' house, and I honestly believed I would only be there for a few months. My father's business had started struggling, and the bills were piling up. So, I made what I thought was a temporary decision. I would move home, help them get back on their feet, and then leave. 3 months became 1 year. 1 year became 2. And somehow, for years disappeared. At first, I only paid the things I could easily manage. Electricity. Internet. My parents' mobile phone plan. Then came car insurance, streaming subscriptions, grocery deliveries, medical payment plans, and property expenses. Every time another bill appeared, I heard the same thing. Just until things get better. So I paid it. I was organized. I kept spreadsheets, saved receipts, and recorded every payment. I wasn't trying to control my family. I just didn't like losing track of money. But something changed. My help stopped being treated like help. It became expected. When my younger sister Megan wanted money for a vacation, Mom and Dad somehow found a way to help her. When I asked if we could split some household expenses, Mom looked at me like I'd said something ridiculous. "You live here too," she said. "Don't act like you're doing us a favor." I remember sitting there with the receipt in my hand. I wanted to argue. Instead, I folded it, put it in my folder, and kept paying. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my records and started adding everything I'd contributed over the previous 4 years. The calculator stopped at more than $38,000. I stared at the number for a long time. $38,000. And the strangest part wasn't the amount. Nobody in that house knew. Not because I'd hidden it, because nobody had ever bothered to ask. I had quietly become the person keeping the household running. And the more I gave, the less anyone seemed to notice. I just didn't know yet what would happen when I finally stopped. The breaking point came 2 weeks after I received a promotion at work. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with an apartment application open on my laptop, staring at the monthly rent and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. I told my parents that night. My father put down his fork. "So, you're just going to abandon us?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said. "I'm finally getting my own place. I've been paying thousands every year. I need to start building a life of my own." My mother's expression changed immediately. "After everything this family has done for you?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I suddenly realized how differently we remembered the last 4 years. I remembered electricity payments, insurance premiums, grocery deliveries, medical bills, and charges on my credit card. They remembered a daughter who lived at home. Then Megan looked up from her phone. "Honestly, Mom and Dad will probably save money once you're gone." The kitchen went completely quiet. That sentence hurt more than anything my parents had said. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at Megan and understood that they had stopped seeing what I contributed a long time ago. I took a breath. "You're right," I said. "Once I leave, everything will be different." I gave them my moving date. I also made my boundary clear. My personal accounts would no longer cover family expenses. Services in my name would be transferred or canceled. My credit card would no longer be used for household purchases. Bills belonging to other adults would become their responsibility. They laughed. My father shook his head. You'll be back within a month. Mom turned to Megan and said, "She's being dramatic." On moving day, I expected tears. Instead, they celebrated. Megan even took a picture as I drove away. I later learned they ordered takeout and opened champagne after my car disappeared down the street. They thought they were celebrating my failure. They had no idea what was about to arrive at their door. 21 days after I moved out, my father found the first envelope. He told me later that he almost threw it away. The words overdue notice were printed across the front, but Robert assumed it was junk mail or some mistake. Then another envelope arrived. Then another. By the fourth day, my mother had a small stack sitting on the kitchen counter. The first few were for internet and mobile service. Each envelope made the situation harder to dismiss. The pile grew beside the fruit bowl, turning ordinary mail into a warning. Then came insurance notices, household subscriptions, medical payment arrangements, utility accounts, grocery delivery memberships, vehicle expenses, storage services, and home maintenance contracts. None of them were random. They were accounts I had been paying. My phone rang that afternoon. "Emma, what's going on?" Mom asked. I was sitting at my new kitchen table, looking out at the parking lot while rain tapped against the window. "What do you mean?" "These bills. They're all overdue." I paused. "Those accounts were in my name." Her voice sharpened. "You knew we needed those things. That's why I gave everyone weeks to transfer them." Silence. Then she said, "You should have made sure they were transferred." I looked at the folder beside me. Inside were copies of every notice I'd sent before moving. I did. Dad apparently checked the paperwork that evening. He found my emails, my written notices, the dates, the instructions. I hadn't disappeared without warning. They simply hadn't believed I was serious. They had assumed I'd get lonely. They had assumed I'd run out of money. They had assumed I'd come back and start paying again. For the next few days, Mom kept sending me photographs of envelopes. 5, 12, 19, then 30. By the time she sent me the 47th notice, I was staring at the number on my phone screen for several seconds. 47. Not 47 debts I had created. 47 obligations they had quietly assumed I would keep carrying. And suddenly, I remembered my mother's words from my final night at home. "You think you're important because you pay a few bills?" I had believed she was insulting me. Now I understood she had accidentally told me the truth. Those few bills had been holding their entire household together. And for the first time, they were finally seeing what happened when the person they never appreciated stopped holding everything up. For the first few days, I kept checking my phone, wondering whether I had made a terrible mistake. What if Mom really couldn't manage the bills? What if Dad's pride kept him from asking for help? What if I'd left them in a situation they couldn't handle? Then I opened the folder on my desk. Written notice, account information, transfer dates, contact numbers, weeks of warning. I hadn't abandoned them. I'd given them every reasonable opportunity to take responsibility for expenses that belonged to adults. They simply assumed I would change my mind. My first month alone felt strange at first. Then it felt peaceful. Nobody knocked on my bedroom door asking me to cover an unexpected charge. Nobody wanted access to my paycheck. Nobody called me selfish because I bought something for myself. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. I bought a small couch for my apartment. I opened a separate savings account. I started planning weekends without calculating whether my family needed the money more than I did. And slowly, an uncomfortable truth became obvious. I hadn't been living with my family. I'd been surviving for them. Then Mom's messages started. "Can you just help us this once?" I didn't answer. A few days later, family doesn't abandon family. Still, I stayed silent. Then came the message that made my stomach tighten. "Your father is furious with you." I put my phone face down. I finally made one rule for myself. If an expense wasn't legally or personally mine, I wouldn't pay it. It wasn't punishment. It was a boundary, a necessary one. And for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for having one. Once the calls stopped, I started doing something I should have done years earlier. I went through every bank statement I could find. 4 years of transactions sat inside those accounts, and I opened them 1 month at a time. At first, I expected to find the same expenses I already knew about. Then I started noticing patterns. There were restaurant charges I didn't remember approving, subscription services I barely recognized, online shopping orders, family entertainment expenses, charges connected to Megan's personal purchases. And then there were the loans. Temporary money I'd sent because someone supposedly needed help immediately. $20 here, $300 there, $1,000 when Dad said the business was short on cash. None of it came back. I created a spreadsheet and started categorizing everything. Household, Megan, parents, personal loans, subscriptions, unauthorized or disputed. The numbers kept climbing. I had originally estimated that I'd contributed more than $38,000. I was wrong. When I added the subscriptions, interest, household purchases, personal expenses, and everything else I'd covered, the total passed $52,000. I stared at that number on my laptop screen. More than $52,000. And suddenly, the money wasn't even the part that hurt most. I searched my name online one evening and found a message from a relative that made my stomach drop. My father had apparently told them, "Emma barely contributes anything. We let her live here because she's family." I read that sentence twice. Then a third time. They hadn't simply accepted my money. They had rewritten the entire story. While I was working, paying bills, organizing appointments, and covering emergencies, they were telling people I was the dependent one. That was when I stopped thinking emotionally. I started thinking carefully. I saved every statement, every email, every transfer record, every notice I'd sent before moving. I spoke with a financial advisor about the remaining shared accounts and made sure I handled each one properly. Then I separated everything I legally could. No dramatic announcement, no threats, just documentation, closed accounts, transferred responsibilities, and a clean financial boundary. By the end, I had a folder containing 4 years of proof. For the first time, I wasn't preparing to defend myself against my family. I was preparing to let the facts speak for me. Linda showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I knew she wasn't there to apologize. The way she stood outside my door, arms crossed, told me she expected me to be the one saying sorry. "Emma, this has gone far enough," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around my apartment, taking in the new couch, the shelves I'd finally filled, the framed pictures on the wall. Then she looked back at me. "You need to fix this." I walked to my desk and picked up a folder. "Do you want to know what I paid?" Linda frowned. "You were part of the household." I opened the folder and placed the statements on the table. For years. Every payment. Every transfer. Every recurring charge. Then I gave her the total. $52,417.83. Her face changed. "That doesn't mean anything," she said quietly. "You lived there." I nodded. "Then why did you celebrate when I left?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That silence told me more than any apology could have. 2 days later, Dad called. He didn't ask how I was doing. He demanded that I reactivate several accounts. "No," I said. "You are punishing your own family." "No. I'm no longer paying for decisions I didn't make." His voice hardened. "You're going to tell everyone you abandoned your parents?" I looked through the window at the afternoon traffic moving below my apartment. "You can tell them whatever you want." Then I added, "If anyone asks me, I'll show them the records." He went quiet. For once, he had nothing to argue with. Megan was the last one to contact me. Her voice wasn't angry. It sounded almost embarrassed. "We didn't think you'd actually stay gone." That sentence hit differently. Not because it hurt, because it confirmed everything. They hadn't respected my boundary because they never believed I could maintain it. They thought eventually I'd get tired, feel guilty, or run out of money and come home. Instead, I stayed. And then the story started spreading through the family. An aunt called me one evening. "Emma, why didn't you tell anyone what was happening?" I sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the folder I'd carried out of that house. "Because I didn't want to embarrass them," I said. "I just wanted to leave." For 4 years, I had tried to keep the peace. Now I didn't need to destroy anyone. I only needed to stop protecting them from the truth. There was no dramatic revenge. No secret plan to ruin my family. Just paperwork. Once every account was properly separated, the consequences started arriving on their own. Services had to be transferred into my parents' names. Several subscriptions were canceled because nobody actually needed them. Megan had to start paying her own expenses. Dad renegotiated household costs, and Mom began tracking every recurring charge for the first time. Then they sold things. And a used family vehicle went first. A few unnecessary purchases followed. Even the extra storage unit was eventually cleared out. The house felt different without my money quietly filling every gap. But the biggest shock came when Dad finally created a spreadsheet of their monthly expenses. He sat at the kitchen table, adding numbers line by line. Rent, utilities, insurance, food, transportation, medical payments, everything. And when he finished, the problem was obvious. Their lifestyle had been built around money they had never actually counted as income. Without my contributions, they weren't suddenly being punished. They were simply seeing their real financial situation for the first time. Megan was furious. "This is all because Emma left," she said. Mom initially agreed, but Dad didn't answer. He just kept staring at the spreadsheet. For once, nobody could argue with the numbers. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. The message was only one sentence. "I didn't realize how much you were doing." I read it twice. For years, I had imagined that if my father ever admitted the truth, I'd have 100 things to say. I thought I'd explain every sacrifice, every late payment, every time I'd open my wallet when someone else said they were desperate. But sitting alone in my apartment, with the evening light stretching across my floor, I realized I didn't need to explain anything anymore. They finally understood. So, I typed 3 words. "I know." Then I put my phone down. That was the closest thing to an apology I ever needed. 6 months after I left, my life looked completely different. I had built an emergency fund, paid down my personal debt, furnished my apartment, and earned another promotion at work. I started investing for my future instead of constantly preparing for someone else's emergency. I even took my first vacation without asking anyone for permission. But the biggest change wasn't in my bank account. It was my phone. Before I left, waking up meant checking for messages about money. Who needed a bill paid? Who needed a transfer? What had gone wrong overnight? Now, I wake up thinking about my own plans. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected for years. I started making weekend plans without calculating whether my family might suddenly need the money. My apartment finally felt like mine. Meanwhile, my parents eventually stabilized their finances. Megan found a job and started contributing. Their household became smaller and simpler. I didn't celebrate their struggles. I celebrated the fact that their problems were no longer automatically mine. For years, I'd believed I had to be useful enough to deserve love. If I paid enough, helped enough, sacrificed enough, maybe I'd finally feel like an equal member of my own family. I understand that differently now. Love that depends on what you pay isn't love you need to earn. I still have that photograph from the day I left. My family is smiling in it. For a long time, I couldn't look at that picture without remembering how unwanted I felt. Now I see something else. I see the exact moment my old life ended, and the moment I finally started building my own. If you're watching this and you've ever felt guilty for saying no to your family, I want you to hear this. Helping people you love isn't wrong. But help should be a choice, not an obligation created through guilt. Sometimes, people become so accustomed to your help that they stop seeing it as help. They start seeing it as your responsibility. And the moment you stop, they say you've changed. But maybe you didn't change. Maybe you simply stopped allowing yourself to be taken for granted. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't revolve around fixing everyone else's problems. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to leave a situation that makes you feel unwanted. And you don't have to destroy anyone to protect yourself. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back, handle your own responsibilities, and let other adults handle theirs. So I'm curious. If your family celebrated when you finally walked away, would you go back? Or would you let them discover what your absence really meant? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Because My story wasn't really about 47 bills. The 47 bills didn't destroy my family. They revealed who had been holding it together and what happened when she finally stopped.